Rosa's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the baby. "Put him down!" Margaret Whitmore's voice cut through the nursery like a blade. "You're just the help. You don't get to hold him." But Rosa didn't move. She couldn't, because in her arms, 6-month-old Lucas Whitmore was cold as stone, barely breathing, and covered in marks that should never appear on any child's body. I said, "Put him down. Now." Rosa looked up at the grandmother, at those cold eyes that held no love, only calculation. And in that moment, she knew the truth that would shatter everything. Someone in this house was killing this baby. Slowly, deliberately, and they were standing right in front of her. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and if you believe every child deserves someone to fight for them, subscribe to this channel and stay with me until the very end. This story will change the way you see the world. The call came at 5:30 in the morning. Rosa Martinez was already awake, sitting at her small kitchen table in the South Bronx, staring at the eviction notice she had read 47 times. The words hadn't changed. 30 days. That was all she had left. Her phone buzzed against the worn wooden table. Unknown number. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Helen Crawford from Premier Staffing. We have an urgent placement." Rosa grabbed the phone so fast she almost knocked over her cold coffee. "I'm listening." "The Whitmore estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. They need someone immediately. Their previous housekeeper left without notice last night." Rosa knew the name. Everyone knew the Whitmore name. Pharmaceutical empire, old money married to new money, the kind of wealth that made regular people invisible. "What's the pay?" "4 times your current rate, plus room and board if you want it." Rosa closed her eyes. 4 times her rate. That meant keeping her apartment. That meant survival. "I'll take it. Excellent. But Mrs. Martinez, I need to tell you something first." Helen's voice dropped lower. "The last 4 housekeepers all quit within weeks. The most recent one, she called me at 2 in the morning crying. Said she couldn't stay another minute. When I asked why, she hung up. 4 housekeepers. In 3 months. Nobody will say what's wrong. They just leave and never talk about it again." Helen paused. "The grandmother runs everything. Her name is Margaret Whitmore. Whatever she says you do. No questions, no opinions, just work and collect your check." Rosa thought about the eviction notice, about the electricity bill marked final warning, about the empty refrigerator. "I understand. One more thing. There's a baby in the house, 6 months old. You'll be cleaning the nursery, but the grandmother has strict rules. Don't touch him. Don't talk to him. Don't look at him longer than necessary." Rosa frowned. "Why would anyone say that about a baby?" Silence on the other end. "Mrs. Martinez, do you want this job or not?" "I'll be there by noon." The line went dead. Rosa stared at her phone for a long moment. 4 housekeepers in 3 months. A grandmother with strange rules about a baby. A woman who called crying at 2 in the morning. Every instinct told her to say no. Every instinct told her something was wrong. But she looked at the eviction notice again, and survival won over instinct. She packed her bag and caught the train to Connecticut. The Whitmore estate sat at the end of a private road that seemed to go on forever. When Rosa finally reached the house, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a house. It was a monument to wealth. White columns, endless windows, the kind of place where people like her were supposed to enter through the back door and never be seen. Rosa stood at the massive front entrance, her single suitcase beside her, and pressed the doorbell. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. The door swung open so suddenly she stumbled backward. A thin woman with gray hair pulled back painfully tight stood in the doorway. Her uniform was crisp, her posture rigid, and her eyes swept over Rosa like she was evaluating something for disposal. "You're late." Rosa checked her watch. "I was told noon. It's 11:52. "In this house, early is on time. On time is late. Late is unacceptable." The woman stepped aside. "I'm Mrs. Peterson, head of household staff. Come in. Leave your bag there." Rosa entered, her footsteps echoing on marble floors that seemed to stretch into infinity. "How long have you worked here, Mrs. Peterson?" 17 years. Then you must have seen the other housekeepers come and go. 4 in 3 months, I heard. Mrs. Peterson stopped walking. She turned slowly, her face completely blank. Who told you that about the staffing agency? The staffing agency talks too much. Mrs. Peterson's jaw tightened. Those women left because they couldn't follow simple instructions. They got too curious, too attached, too involved in things that weren't their business. Attached to what? Mrs. Peterson stared at her for a long moment. The baby. Rosa felt something cold settle in her stomach. What about the baby? Nothing. That's exactly my point. The baby is nothing to you. You clean around him. You don't interact with him. You don't develop feelings about him. He is not your concern. He's a baby. How can a baby not be someone's concern? Mrs. Peterson moved closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. The last housekeeper, Maria, she thought the same thing. She started spending extra time in the nursery, started asking questions, started looking at things she shouldn't look at. Mrs. Peterson's eyes bore into Rosa's. She left in the middle of the night without even collecting her last paycheck. Wouldn't answer my calls for a week. When she finally did, you know what she said? Rosa shook her head. She said, that house is evil, that family is evil, and if you're smart, you'll get out too. Mrs. Peterson straightened up. She was being dramatic, of course. Rich families are complicated, that's all. But the lesson stands. Do your job, don't ask questions, don't get attached. She turned and continued walking. The nursery is on the 2nd floor. You clean it at 6 in the morning before the family wakes. You have exactly 30 minutes, in and out. Understand? Yes, ma'am. Your room is in the staff quarters, 3rd floor, meals at 6:12 and 6. Stay out of the family's way. Mrs. Peterson handed her a schedule and a ring of keys. One more thing. Mrs. Margaret Whitmore is the head of this household, not Mr. Whitmore, not his wife. Mrs. Margaret. Whatever she says is law. If she tells you the sky is green, you agree. If she tells you to jump off the roof, you ask which side. Is that clear? Rosa wanted to ask why. She wanted to ask what kind of family operated this way, but she thought about her eviction notice. Crystal clear. Good. Now get settled. You start tomorrow at 5:45. That night, Rosa couldn't sleep. Her room was small but comfortable, nicer than her apartment in the Bronx. But the silence in this house was wrong. Not peaceful silence, heavy silence. The kind that pressed against your ears and made you feel like you were being watched. At 2 in the morning, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her door. Slow, deliberate, stopping right outside her room. Rosa held her breath, staring at the thin line of light under the door. She could see shadows. Someone was standing there, waiting, listening. For 5 full minutes, the shadow didn't move. Then slowly, the footsteps retreated down the hallway. Rosa didn't sleep at all after that. At 5:45 the next morning, Rosa made her way to the nursery. The hallway leading to it was lined with portraits of Whitmore ancestors. They all had the same cold expression. They all seemed to be watching her, judging her. She reached the nursery door and heard something that made her freeze. A cry. But not a normal baby cry. This was weak, thin, barely there, like the baby was trying to scream but had no strength left. Rosa pushed open the door. The cold hit her first. The room was freezing. She could see her own breath forming clouds in front of her face. Then she saw him. Lucas Whitmore lay in an expensive white crib wrapped in a thin blanket that couldn't possibly keep him warm. His skin was gray. Not pale. Gray. His eyes were open, but they weren't focusing on anything. When he heard Rosa's footsteps, he turned his head slowly. So slowly. Like that tiny movement cost him everything he had. He looked at her, and Rosa felt her heart shatter, because those weren't baby eyes. Those were the eyes of someone who had already given up. Someone who knew that crying wouldn't bring help. Someone who had stopped expecting anyone to care. "Oh my God," Rosa whispered. She rushed to the crib and reached for him. His tiny fingers were ice cold when she touched them. Jesus Christ. She lifted him from the crib as carefully as she could. He weighed nothing, literally nothing. Babies were supposed to be solid, chunky, full of life. Lucas felt like holding a ghost. Rosa looked around frantically. Her eyes found the thermostat on the wall. 58 degrees. What the hell? She walked over, still holding Lucas against her chest, and turned the dial up to 72. The heating system hummed to life immediately. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, holding him close. "It's okay. I'm going to warm you up." She carried him to the rocking chair in the corner and sat down, trying to share her body heat with this tiny, fading life. That's when she noticed the smell. Faint, chemical, wrong. It clung to his blanket like invisible poison. Rosa had cleaned enough houses to recognize medical smells. This wasn't antiseptic. This wasn't any medicine she knew. This was something else. Her hands trembling, Rosa carefully unwrapped Lucas's blanket. She needed to see. She needed to understand. She checked his arms first, then his legs, then his tiny torso, and then she found them. Marks, small, dark red just beneath his left armpit. She looked closer. The edges were sharp, fresh. This wasn't a birthmark. She checked his other side. Another mark. His ribcage. Another. The bottom of his tiny foot. Another. Rosa's breath stopped. These weren't random bruises. These were deliberate. Placed. Like someone had pressed something against his skin again and again in places nobody would see unless they were looking. "Who did this to you?" Rosa whispered, tears burning her eyes. "Who's hurting you, baby?" Lucas just looked at her with those ancient, hopeless eyes. The door slammed open. Rosa jumped to her feet, clutching Lucas protectively, her heart hammering against her ribs. A woman stood in the doorway, late 20s, blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, silk robe, empty eyes. "Who are you? What are you doing with my son?" "I'm Rosa, ma'am, the new housekeeper. The room was freezing. I was just warming him up." The woman's eyes went to the thermostat. Something flickered across her face. Fear, pain. It vanished before Rosa could identify it. "I'm Margaret Whitmore, his mother." She didn't move toward the crib, didn't reach for her baby, just stood frozen in the doorway. "Mrs. Whitmore, your son is very cold. He was barely responsive when I came in. I think something might be wrong with him." Catherine laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. "Something wrong with him." "Yes, something is very wrong with him." "Then we should call a doctor. We should—" "The doctor comes 3 times a week." Catherine's voice was hollow. "He says Lucas has a rare condition. He says the treatment is working. He says everything is fine." Rosa looked down at the baby in her arms, at his gray skin, at his barely there breathing, at the marks hidden beneath his clothes. "This doesn't look fine to me." "No." Catherine finally met her eyes. "It doesn't, does it? Then why don't you do something? He's your son." The words came out harsher than Rosa intended, but she couldn't help it. This woman was standing there while her baby was dying, doing nothing. Catherine flinched like she'd been slapped. "You think I don't want to do something? You think I don't lie awake every night watching him struggle to breathe? You think I don't count the marks that appear on his body after every doctor's visit?" She stepped into the room, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "I tried to take him to the hospital 2 months ago. I packed a bag. I called a cab. I made it all the way to the front door." "What happened?" Catherine's face crumpled. "Margaret stopped me. She said if I took him out of the house without her permission, she would have me declared an unfit mother. She has lawyers, judges, connections everywhere. She said she would take Lucas from me forever, and I would never see him again." Rosa felt ice spreading through her veins. "She threatened to take your own baby." "She doesn't threaten, she states facts. Margaret Whitmore has never made an empty threat in her life." Catherine was crying now, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "I married her son. I gave her a grandchild, but I'm not good enough. I've never been good enough, and she's been waiting for me to fail since the day we met." "Fail at what?" "Being a mother, being a Whitmore, being worthy of this family." Catherine's voice broke completely. "And now Lucas is sick all the time, weak all the time, and Margaret keeps documenting everything. Every time I try to comfort him, and he cries harder. Every time I make a decision she doesn't agree with. She's building a case, building evidence that I can't take care of my own child." Rosa's mind was racing, connecting dots she didn't want to connect. "Mrs. Whitmore, you said the doctor comes 3 times a week." "Yes, and Lucas gets worse after every visit." Catherine nodded slowly, her eyes widening like she was finally hearing her own truth. "Dr. Foster, he's been the family physician for years. Margaret hired him. Margaret pays him. Margaret tells him what to do." "Has anyone else examined Lucas? Anyone who doesn't work for Margaret?" "No, she won't allow it. She says outside doctors don't understand his condition. She says—" Heavy footsteps in the hallway. Catherine's face went white. "She's coming. Give me Lucas. Now. And whatever you saw, whatever I said, you forget it. Do you understand? You forget all of it." Rosa didn't want to let go. Every instinct screamed at her to hold on to this baby, to protect him, to run. But Catherine was already pulling him from her arms, already arranging her face into a blank mask, already becoming the empty woman Rosa had first seen in the doorway. The door opened. Margaret Whitmore entered. She was exactly what Rosa had imagined, and worse. 65 years old, silver hair cut severe, gray suit that screamed money and power, eyes that held nothing but cold calculation. "Catherine, you're out of bed early." Margaret's gaze swept to Rosa. "And you must be the new girl. Rosa, is it?" "Yes, ma'am." "You've been in here for 23 minutes. You were given 30 minutes to clean. You've done no cleaning. Why?" Rosa's mouth went dry. The baby was crying. The room was cold. You were just holding my grandson, against specific instructions." Margaret walked to the thermostat and looked at it. "And you changed the temperature, against specific instructions." "Ma'am, the room was at 58 degrees. That's dangerous for a baby. They can't regulate their own body temperature." "Are you a doctor, Rosa?" "No, ma'am." "Are you a nurse?" "No, ma'am." "Then you have no idea what is or isn't dangerous for my grandson." Margaret turned the thermostat back down to 58. "Lucas has a condition that requires him to be kept at specific temperatures. His physician has determined this protocol. You are not qualified to question it." Rosa wanted to argue. She wanted to scream that no condition required a baby to freeze, that those marks on his body weren't from any medical treatment, that something in this house was very, very wrong. But she looked at Catherine's terrified face. She thought about the 4 housekeepers who had quit. She remembered Mrs. Peterson's warning about Maria who fled in the middle of the night. "Yes, ma'am," Rosa said quietly. "I understand." "Good." Margaret turned to Catherine. "Give Lucas to me. You're upsetting him." "He's not upset. He's trembling. Look at him." Margaret stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Every time you hold him, he gets worse. We've discussed this, Catherine. Your anxiety transfers to him. Your incompetence is making him sick." Catherine's face crumpled, but she handed Lucas over without another word. Rosa watched Margaret hold the baby. There was no warmth in it, no love. She held him like she was holding an object, a possession, a means to an end. "Rosa, you will leave the nursery now. You will clean the downstairs bathrooms instead. You will not return to this room unless I specifically request it." Rosa hesitated. Lucas's eyes found hers over Margaret's shoulder, those ancient, hopeless eyes. They seemed to be pleading with her, begging her not to leave. "Now, Rosa." Rosa walked out feeling like she was abandoning him to his death. For the next 3 days, Rosa was not allowed near the nursery. She cleaned bathrooms. She polished silver. She scrubbed floors that were already spotless. And every night, she lay awake thinking about Lucas. On the 4th morning, she saw Dr. David Foster arrive. He was tall, graying temples, carrying a black medical bag that looked expensive. Margaret met him at the door personally, something Rosa had never seen her do for anyone else. They spoke in low voices, their heads close together. Rosa pretended to dust a vase nearby, straining to hear. "The dosage may need adjustment," Dr. Foster was saying. "Not fast enough," Margaret replied. The custody hearing is in 6 weeks." Rosa's blood ran cold. Custody hearing, 6 weeks. "I'll increase the frequency. Dr. Foster said. "But you need to understand the risks." "I understand the risks. I also understand what happens if we don't succeed." Margaret's voice hardened. "Just do what I'm paying you to do." They went upstairs together. Rosa stood frozen, her dust rag hanging limply in her hand. Dosage, frequency, custody hearing. They were talking about Lucas like he was a project, an experiment, a tool to achieve some goal. An hour later, Rosa heard it. Lucas screaming, not his usual weak cry, real screaming, desperate, terrified, in pain. The sound cut through the house like a knife. Rosa ran toward the stairs before she could stop herself. She made it halfway up before Mrs. Peterson caught her arm. "Where do you think you're going?" "The baby, he's screaming. Something's wrong." "Dr. Foster is with him. The treatment can be uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable? He sounds like he's being tortured." Mrs. Peterson's grip tightened painfully. "Listen to me very carefully. Whatever you think you heard, whatever you think you know, you're wrong. The baby is sick. The doctor is treating him. That's all. If you go up there, if you interfere, Margaret will destroy you. She'll have you arrested for trespassing, for assault, for anything she can think of, and no one will believe your word against hers." The screaming stopped. Sudden silence, almost worse than the screaming. "Let go of me," Rosa said quietly. "Promise me you won't do anything stupid." Rosa looked Mrs. Peterson in the eye. "I promise." It was the first time in her life she had lied so completely. That night, Rosa searched for Dr. David Foster on her phone. It took hours of digging through medical databases, news archives, court records, but she found it. 5 years ago, California Medical Board. License suspension for 6 months. The reason: falsifying patient records for the Morrison family of San Francisco. They wanted to prove their elderly father was mentally incompetent so they could seize control of his estate. Dr. Foster created fake diagnoses, fake test results, fake everything. He'd done it before, he was doing it again. Rosa kept searching. She found an article from a nursing magazine about something called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a condition where caregivers deliberately make children sick to gain attention, sympathy, or control. But Margaret didn't want attention or sympathy. She wanted custody. She was making Lucas sick to prove Catherine was an unfit mother. Rosa stared at her phone screen until her eyes burned. She had no money, no power, no connections. She was just a cleaning lady from the Bronx with an eviction notice and a survival instinct. But she also had photographs. Secret photographs of Lucas's marks that she'd taken that first morning. She had what she'd overheard between Margaret and Dr. Foster. She had the truth. And she had a choice to make. Walk away, keep her job, pay her rent, survive. Or fight for a baby who had no one else to fight for him. Risk everything, lose everything. Maybe even go to prison if Margaret's lawyers came after her. Rosa thought about her mother, who had worked double shifts her entire life to keep them fed. "Mija," her mother used to say, "the world is full of people who see wrong and look away. Don't be one of them. Being poor doesn't mean being blind." Lucas's face appeared in her mind, those ancient eyes, that gray skin, those hidden marks. Rosa made her decision. The next morning she went back to the nursery. She knew she wasn't supposed to be there. She knew Margaret would be furious. She didn't care anymore. Lucas was in his crib, weaker than she'd ever seen him. His eyes were barely open. His breathing was shallow and irregular, but when he saw Rosa, something flickered in his face. Recognition, hope. "I'm here, baby," Rosa whispered, lifting him gently. "I'm here, and I'm going to get you out of this house if it's the last thing I do." She heard footsteps in the hallway, Margaret's voice sharp and cold. "Rosa, is that you in the nursery?" Rosa looked down at Lucas. He looked up at her. And in that moment she knew. This wasn't about her anymore. This wasn't about rent or survival or playing it safe. This was about saving an innocent life. Whatever came next, whatever it cost her, she was ready. The door handle turned. The door swung open. Margaret stood in the doorway, her face twisted with cold fury. "What do you think you're doing?" Rosa held Lucas tighter against her chest. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, but she didn't back down. She couldn't. Not anymore. I'm holding a baby who needs to be held. I gave you specific instructions. You were banned from this room. Yes, ma'am, you did. And yet here you are. Yes, ma'am, here I am. Margaret stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown to something terrible. Do you have any idea what I could do to you? One phone call. That's all it would take. One phone call and you'd be arrested for trespassing, for endangering a child, for whatever else my lawyers decide to charge you with. Rosa's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. And what would you tell them about the marks on his body, about the 58-degree room, about the doctor who lost his license in California for falsifying medical records? Margaret's face went completely still. For 3 full seconds, nobody breathed. What did you just say? Dr. David Foster, California Medical Board, 5 years ago, suspended for creating fake diagnoses to help a family steal their father's estate. Rosa met Margaret's eyes without flinching. You hired him because he'll do whatever you pay him to do, including make your grandson sick enough to prove his mother can't take care of him. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Margaret smiled. It was the most terrifying thing Rosa had ever seen. You're smarter than you look, Margaret said quietly. The other housekeepers suspected something, but none of them figured it out. You actually did your research. Rosa felt her blood turn to ice. You're not even going to deny it. Why would I? You can't prove anything. You're a cleaning lady from the Bronx with an eviction notice and no connections. I'm Margaret Whitmore. I have judges on speed dial. I have police commissioners who owe me favors. I have enough lawyers to bury you in legal fees for the rest of your life. Margaret stepped closer. Who do you think anyone is going to believe? Lucas whimpered in Rosa's arms. He's dying, Rosa whispered. You're killing your own grandson. I'm securing his future. There's a difference. Margaret's voice was ice. Catherine is weak, pathetic. She would have raised Lucas to be just like her, soft, useless, a disappointment. But under my guidance, he'll become a real Whitmore, strong, powerful, worthy of this family's legacy. He won't become anything if he's dead. He won't die. Dr. Foster knows exactly what he's doing. Just enough to make Lucas appear gravely ill. Just enough to make Catherine look incompetent. Once I have custody, once Catherine is out of the picture, the treatments will stop and Lucas will miraculously recover. Rosa stared at her in horror. You're insane. I'm practical. Margaret held out her arms. Now give me my grandson. No. The word came out before Rosa could stop it. Firm, final, absolute. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I said no. I'm not giving him to you. I'm taking him out of this house, and I'm taking him to a hospital where real doctors can examine him. Doctors you don't own. Margaret laughed. It was a cold, brittle sound. And how exactly do you plan to do that? My security team is downstairs. My driver controls the gate. You don't have a car. You don't even know how to get out of Greenwich without GPS. She tilted her head. You have no money, no power, no support. You have nothing, Rosa. You are nothing. Rosa thought about her mother working double shifts, about growing up in the Bronx where people had nothing but still found ways to survive, about all the times she'd been told she was nothing by people who thought money made them better. Maybe I am nothing, Rosa said quietly. But I'm the nothing who's standing between you and this baby. And I'm not moving. Margaret's smile disappeared. Then you'll regret it. She turned and walked out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Rosa stood frozen, holding Lucas, waiting for whatever came next. 30 seconds later, she heard Margaret's voice from downstairs. Call the police. Tell them we have an intruder who's threatening our grandchild. Tell them to hurry. Rosa's heart stopped. She looked down at Lucas. His eyes were barely open, but he was looking at her, trusting her, depending on her. She had maybe 10 minutes before the police arrived. 10 minutes to figure out how to save this baby. Her phone. She needed her phone. Rosa grabbed it from her pocket with her free hand. Her fingers were shaking so badly she could barely type. She pulled up the photos she'd taken of Lucas's marks. She opened the article about Dr. Foster's suspension. She screenshotted everything. Then she did something desperate. She sent everything to the one person in this house who might still help. Margaret Whitmore. The message read, "Your mother-in-law admitted everything. She's making Lucas sick to take him from you. The police are coming. I need you to be brave. For your son. Please." Rosa waited, her heart pounding. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. Downstairs she could hear Margaret giving instructions to the staff. Calm. Controlled. Like she had orchestrated situations like this 100 times before. 4 minutes. Rosa's phone buzzed. Catherine's reply. "I can't. She'll destroy me." Rosa typed back. "She's already destroying your son. If you don't act now, he'll die." "Is that what you want? To watch him die while you do nothing?" The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then what do I do? Rosa felt tears burning her eyes. Finally, Catherine was ready to fight. She typed quickly, "Come to the nursery, bring your phone, record everything. We need evidence she can't deny." Another agonizing minute passed. Then the nursery door opened. Catherine stood in the doorway, pale as death, trembling so hard she could barely stand. But she was there. She had come. "I'm scared," Catherine whispered. "I know, so am I." Rosa held Lucas out toward her. "But he needs his mother. He needs you to be brave enough to save him." Catherine crossed the room slowly, like she was walking through water. She reached out and took Lucas from Rosa's arms. The moment she held him, something changed in her face. Rosa saw it happen in real time. The fear didn't disappear, but something else rose up alongside it. Something fiercer, something stronger. A mother's love, a mother's rage. "She's been hurting him," Catherine said, her voice barely audible. "This whole time. She's been hurting my baby." "Yes, and I let her." Tears streamed down Catherine's face. "I was so scared of losing him that I let her kill him. You didn't know for sure, but now you do, and now you can stop it." Catherine looked down at Lucas. His eyes had opened wider than Rosa had ever seen them. He was looking at his mother with something that might have been recognition, something that might have been hope. "Mama's here, baby," Catherine whispered. "Mama's here, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again." Sirens in the distance. Rosa grabbed Catherine's arm. "The police are coming. Margaret called them. She's going to tell them I'm a threat, that I tried to kidnap Lucas. They'll believe her unless you tell them the truth. She'll destroy me. She has lawyers' connections. She'll destroy Lucas if you don't." Rosa's voice was urgent. "You have to choose right now. Your fear or your son. You can't save both." The sirens were getting closer. Catherine's whole body was shaking. She looked down at Lucas, at his gray skin, his weak breathing, his tiny body that had been systematically poisoned for months. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll do it. Do you have your phone?" Catherine pulled it from her robe pocket with trembling hands. "Turn on the voice recorder. Put it back in your pocket. When Margaret talks to the police, stay close. Get everything she says." "What about you?" Rosa swallowed hard. "I'll probably be arrested, at least at first. But if you have evidence, if you can prove what's happening, it won't matter. They'll have to investigate." "Rosa," Catherine's voice broke, "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by protecting your son. That's all I want." The sirens were right outside now. Footsteps pounding up the stairs, voices shouting. Rosa positioned herself between the door and Catherine. "No matter what happens," she said quietly, "don't let them take him back to Margaret. Whatever you have to do, whatever it costs, protect him." The door burst open. 2 police officers rushed in, hands on their weapons. "Freeze, don't move." Rosa raised her hands slowly. "Officers, my name is Rosa Martinez. I'm the housekeeper here. Before you arrest me, I need you to know that the baby in this room has been systematically poisoned by his grandmother. His mother can confirm this. Please just look at him. Look at the marks on his body." "Ma'am, we need you to step away from the family." "Just look at him. That's all I'm asking. Look at what they've done to him." Margaret appeared in the doorway behind the officers, her face a mask of concerned distress. "Officers, thank God you're here. This woman has been behaving erratically for days. She's become obsessed with our grandson. She's filled my daughter-in-law's head with paranoid delusions." "That's not true." Catherine's voice was stronger than Rosa had ever heard it. "Everything she said is true. My mother-in-law has been making Lucas sick. I have proof." Margaret's composure cracked for just a second. "Catherine, darling, you're confused. You've been under so much stress." "I'm not confused." Catherine stepped forward. Lucas clutched against her chest. "I've been scared, terrified. Of you. Of what you could do to me. But I'm not scared anymore." She looked at the officers. "Please, examine my son. There are marks all over his body. He's been declining for months. His grandmother controls his medical care through a doctor who was suspended for falsifying records. I can prove all of it." One of the officers, older with gray at his temples, studied Catherine's face carefully. "Ma'am, you're saying your child is being harmed?" "Yes, by my mother-in-law, with the help of the family physician." "That's absurd," Margaret snapped. "She's hysterical. Catherine has a history of mental health issues. I've been documenting her instability for months." "Of course you have," Catherine's voice was bitter. "Because that was your plan all along, wasn't it? Make Lucas sick. Make me look crazy. Take everything." The older officer held up his hand. "Everyone calm down." "Ma'am," he looked at Catherine. "If you believe your child is in danger, I need you to come with us. We'll take the baby to the hospital for examination." "You can't do that without my consent," Margaret said sharply. "I have medical power of attorney. The mother is right here and she's consenting." The officer's voice was firm. "Mrs. Whitmore, you can call your lawyers if you want. But that baby is going to be examined by independent physicians. Tonight." Margaret's face twisted with rage. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'll have your badge. I'll have you working security at a parking garage by next week." "Maybe you will," the officer shrugged. "But that baby's still going to the hospital." He turned to his partner. "Help Mrs. Whitmore, the younger one, get the baby ready. I'll stay here with the grandmother." "What about her?" The younger officer pointed at Rosa. The older officer looked at Rosa for a long moment, really looked at her. "Did you hurt that child?" "No, sir. I've been trying to protect him." "Then you can come to the station and give a statement. Voluntarily." His eyes flicked to Margaret. "Unless someone wants to press charges right now." Margaret's jaw clenched. Rosa could see her calculating. Pressing charges would mean more police involvement, more questions, more investigation. "No charges," Margaret said finally. "I just want this woman out of my house." "Fair enough." The officer nodded to Rosa. "Get your things. You're done here either way." Rosa walked toward the door, but Catherine caught her arm. "Rosa, thank you." Tears were streaming down her face. "You saved my son." "He's not saved yet," Rosa said quietly. "Get him to the hospital. Get him examined. Get everything documented. This fight is just beginning. I won't let you down. I promise." Rosa looked at Lucas one last time. His eyes were still fixed on her, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was something different in them. Hope. Real hope. "Take care of your mama, little one," Rosa whispered. "She's going to need you." She walked out of the nursery, past Margaret's furious glare down the stairs, and out of the Whitmore mansion. The night air hit her face like cold water. Behind her, she could hear Margaret already on the phone with her lawyers. Ahead of her, she could see the police cruiser waiting. Rosa didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if Catherine would stay strong. She didn't know if the hospital would find evidence. She didn't know if Margaret's money and power would crush everything in the end. But she knew one thing. She had done the right thing, and whatever came next, she could live with that. 3 hours later, Rosa sat in the Greenwich police station waiting. She had given her statement twice, once to the younger officer who took notes without much expression, once to a detective who asked sharper questions and seemed more interested in her answers. Now she was sitting in a plastic chair staring at a clock that seemed to move backward, wondering what was happening at the hospital. The door opened. The older officer from the mansion walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Rosa. "Thought you might need this." "Thank you." Rosa wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "What's happening?" The officer sat down across from her. "The baby's being examined by the pediatric team at Greenwich Hospital. His mother is with him." He paused. "I made some calls. About that doctor you mentioned. David Foster." Rosa sat up straighter. What did you find? Nothing that'll hold up in court, but enough to make me curious. The officer leaned forward. His license suspension in California wasn't public information. You had to dig for that. How'd a housekeeper from the Bronx know where to look? The internet? Time? Desperation? Rosa met his eyes. When you see a baby dying and everyone tells you nothing's wrong, you start looking for answers wherever you can find them. The officer nodded slowly. I've been on the force 23 years. You know what I've learned, rich people get away with a lot. They have lawyers, they have connections. They know how to work the system. He took a sip of his coffee. But every once in a while, someone comes along who doesn't care about any of that. Someone who just sees wrong and refuses to look away. What are you saying? I'm saying that if Margaret Whitmore is doing what you think she's doing, she's going to fight back hard. She's going to use every resource she has to destroy you, to silence you, to make you disappear. Rosa felt her stomach tighten. I know. And I'm saying that despite all that, the officer leaned back, you might have a chance, because Catherine Whitmore is talking. Really talking. She's been at the hospital for 2 hours and she hasn't stopped. Names, dates, everything Margaret told her. Everything she saw but was too scared to report. Rosa felt tears spring to her eyes. She's really doing it. She's really doing it. The officer stood up. You gave her courage, Rosa. Whatever happens next, remember that. You gave that woman back her spine. He walked toward the door, then stopped. You're free to go. We have your contact information. If we need anything else, we'll be in touch. That's it. For now. He opened the door. But I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again soon. Rosa walked out of the police station into the cold night air. She had no job. She had no place to stay. She had maybe $40 in her pocket and nowhere to go. But somewhere in Greenwich Hospital, a baby was finally being examined by doctors who weren't paid to lie. And somewhere in that same hospital, a mother was finally fighting for her son. Rosa pulled out her phone and called the only person she had left. Her mother answered on the second ring. Mija, it's 3 a.m. What's wrong? Rosa started crying. All the fear, all the tension, all the adrenaline finally breaking through. Mama, I did something that might cost me everything. Tell me. So Rosa told her. Everything. The baby, the marks, Margaret, the confrontation, the police. When she finished, there was silence on the line. Then her mother said, Come home, Mija. Whatever happens next, you come home. But the rent, the eviction, we'll figure it out. We always do. Her mother's voice was warm, strong, certain. You did the right thing, Rosa. You saved a child. Nothing else matters. Rosa caught the last train back to the Bronx. She slept in her mother's tiny apartment, in her old childhood bedroom, surrounded by familiar smells and sounds and safety. When she woke up the next morning, she had 37 missed calls and 112 text messages. The story had broken. 2 days later, the news was everywhere. Every channel, every newspaper, every website. Whitmore heir hospitalized grandmother under investigation for child abuse. Family physician arrested in baby poisoning. Case housekeeper turned whistleblower. The woman who saved Lucas Whitmore. Rosa watched the coverage from her mother's couch, feeling like she was watching someone else's life. Catherine had done it. She had told everything. The police had found evidence at the mansion. Dr. Foster had broken down during questioning and confessed to everything. Margaret Whitmore had been arrested. The woman who had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, so above the law, was now sitting in a jail cell, waiting for her lawyers to arrange bail. And Lucas was improving. That was the news that made Rosa cry. Within 48 hours of being removed from the mansion, Lucas had started getting better. His color returned. He started eating. He started crying, real cries, strong cries, the cries of a baby who finally believed someone would answer. Rosa's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She'd been getting calls from reporters all day, but something made her pick up. Hello? Rosa, it's Catherine. Rosa's breath caught. Mrs. Whitmore? How is he? He's amazing. Catherine's voice was thick with tears. The doctors say he's responding better than they expected. Whatever Margaret was giving him, it's clearing his system. They say in a few weeks he might be completely healthy." Rosa closed her eyes, letting the relief wash over her. "That's wonderful. That's the best news I've ever heard. Rosa, I need to see you. There's something I have to say, in person. Can you come to the hospital?" Rosa hesitated. Greenwich was an hour away. She had no money for a cab. "I'll send a car," Catherine said, reading her mind. "Please, it's important." 2 hours later, Rosa walked into Lucas's hospital room. The baby was in a proper crib surrounded by monitors that beeped steadily. His skin was pink, his eyes were bright. When he saw Rosa, he made a sound she'd never heard before. He laughed, a real baby laugh, pure and joyful and alive. Rosa's knees almost gave out. "He knows you," Catherine said softly. "Even here, even after everything, he knows who saved him." Rosa walked to the crib and reached down to touch Lucas's tiny hand. His fingers wrapped around hers, immediately strong and certain. "Hey, little one," she whispered. "Look at you. Look how strong you are." "Rosa." Catherine moved to stand beside her. "I owe you everything. You risked your life for my son when I was too afraid to do it myself. You stood up to Margaret when I couldn't. You gave me courage when I had none. You found your own courage in the end. Only because you showed me it was possible." Catherine took a deep breath. "I want to help you. Whatever you need. Money, a job, a place to stay, anything." Rosa turned to look at her. "I don't want your money, Mrs. Whitmore." "Then what do you want?" Rosa looked back at Lucas. "I want you to be the mother he deserves. I want you to protect him. I want you to make sure nothing like this ever happens to him again." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I will. I swear to God I will." "Then that's all I need." Catherine reached out and hugged her, holding on like Rosa was the only thing keeping her from drowning. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing him, for fighting for him, for not looking away." Rosa hugged her back, feeling something warm spread through her chest. She had come to the Whitmore mansion desperate for a job. She had found something much more important. She had found the courage to do what was right, no matter the cost. And that, she realized, was worth more than any paycheck. A week passed. Dr. David Foster formally confessed to administering low doses of a medication that mimicked the symptoms of severe illness. He claimed Margaret had told him it was just to make Lucas appear sick, not actually harm him. His lawyers were already working on a plea deal. Margaret Whitmore was charged with child endangerment conspiracy and assault of a minor. Her bail was set at $5 million. She paid it within hours, but she was confined to house arrest with an ankle monitor. Her lawyers had already started fighting the charges, claiming Margaret was a concerned grandmother who had been misled by Dr. Foster. But Catherine wasn't backing down. Every day brought new revelations. Bank records showing payments to Dr. Foster, emails between Margaret and her lawyers discussing custody strategies, text messages where Margaret complained about Catherine's incompetence and her plans to fix the situation. The case against her was growing stronger by the hour, and Rosa Martinez had become the center of it all. Reporters camped outside her mother's apartment building. News vans lined the street. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests, book offers, movie deals. Rosa turned them all down. "Why?" her mother asked one evening, after Rosa had rejected yet another six-figure offer for her exclusive story. "Because it's not about me," Rosa said. "It's about Lucas. It's about making sure Margaret can't hurt anyone else. If I start doing interviews and making money, they'll say I did it for attention. They'll say I was looking for a payday all along." Her mother nodded slowly. "You're smart, mija. Smarter than those rich people give you credit for." Rosa smiled. "I learned from you, Mama." The next morning, Rosa received a phone call that changed everything. "Miss Martinez, this is Rebecca Torres from Child Protective Services. We need to talk." Rosa's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong with Lucas?" No, Lucas is fine. Better than fine, actually. He's been moved to a rehabilitation facility, and he's making excellent progress." Rebecca paused. I'm calling about something else. We're building a case against Margaret Whitmore, a strong case, but we need your help. What kind of help? We need you to testify, formally, in court. Another pause. I should warn you, Miss Martinez. If you agree to this, Margaret's lawyers will come after you with everything they have. They'll dig into your past. They'll try to discredit you. They'll make your life very difficult. Rosa thought about Lucas's ancient eyes that first morning, about his gray skin, about those marks hidden beneath his clothes. She thought about the sound of his laugh in the hospital room, pure and joyful and alive. When do we start? Rebecca's voice warmed with something that sounded like respect. I'll send a car for you tomorrow, 9 a.m. We have a lot of work to do. Rosa hung up the phone. Her hands were shaking. She was about to go to war against one of the richest, most powerful families in Connecticut, a family with unlimited resources and lawyers who would stop at nothing to win. But she thought of Lucas. She thought of every child out there who was suffering while the adults around them looked away. And she knew with absolute certainty that she would see this through to the end, no matter what it cost her, no matter how hard it got, no matter what Margaret Whitmore threw at her, because some fights were worth fighting, and this was one of them. The car arrived at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning. Rosa had been awake since 4, sitting at her mother's kitchen table, drinking coffee she couldn't taste and staring at the wall. Her mother had tried to talk to her, but Rosa couldn't find words. Everything inside her felt like it was vibrating at a frequency too high for speech. She was about to go to war against Margaret Whitmore. The driver didn't speak during the hour-long ride to the CPS office in Hartford. Rosa was grateful for the silence. She used the time to go over everything in her head, every detail, every conversation, every mark she had seen on Lucas's body. Rebecca Torres met her at the entrance. Miss Martinez, thank you for coming. Rosa, please, if we're going to do this together, call me Rosa. Rebecca smiled slightly. All right, Rosa, come with me. There's a lot to discuss. They walked through a maze of hallways until they reached a conference room filled with files, documents, and 3 other people Rosa didn't recognize. This is our team, Rebecca said. District Attorney William Chen, Detective Sarah Morrison from the Greenwich Police Department, and Dr. Patricia Wells, a pediatric forensic specialist. Rosa shook each of their hands, feeling more intimidated with every introduction. Please sit down, William Chen said. He was a serious man in his 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Miss Martinez, I want to be very clear about what you're getting into. Margaret Whitmore has hired one of the most aggressive defense teams in the country, Robert Hartley. Have you heard of him? Rosa shook her head. He's known as the Destroyer. His specialty is dismantling witnesses. He's won cases that should have been unwinnable by destroying the credibility of everyone who testifies against his clients. William leaned forward. He's going to come after you, Rosa. Hard. He's going to dig into every mistake you've ever made, every lie you've ever told, every parking ticket you've ever gotten, and he's going to use it all to make you look unreliable. Rosa swallowed hard. I don't have anything to hide. Everyone has something to hide. William's voice wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. The question is whether what they find is enough to discredit you. So I need you to tell me now before we go any further. Is there anything in your past that could be used against you? Anything at all? Rosa thought for a long moment. When I was 19, I got arrested for shoplifting. Charges were dropped because it was a misunderstanding, but there's probably a record somewhere. What happened? I was with a friend who stole something. I didn't know she had done it until the security guard stopped us. They arrested both of us. When they reviewed the tape, they saw I hadn't taken anything. William nodded, writing something down. What else? I was evicted from an apartment 3 years ago. Couldn't make rent. It took me 6 months to get back on my feet. Anything else? Relationships, family issues, drug use, anything? Rosa felt her face flush. My father left when I was 7. He was an alcoholic. I haven't seen him since. She paused. And I had a boyfriend once who hit me. I stayed with him for 6 months before I got out. The room was quiet. None of that makes you a bad person, Rosa, Rebecca said gently. But Hartley will try to use it. He'll say you come from a broken home. He'll say you have poor judgment in relationships. He'll say you're unstable, unreliable, prone to drama. That's insane. What does any of that have to do with what Margaret did to Lucas? Nothing. But that's not the point. The point is to make the jury doubt you, to make them wonder if maybe you saw things that weren't there, if maybe you're the kind of person who overreacts, who imagines problems, who creates chaos. Rosa felt anger rising in her chest. So they're going to put me on trial. I'm the one who saved that baby. Welcome to the American legal system, Detective Morrison said dryly. The person who does the right thing gets torn apart, while the person who did the wrong thing sits back and watches. William held up his hand. That's why we need to prepare you. We have 6 weeks until the preliminary hearing. 6 weeks to make sure you can handle whatever Hartley throws at you. He looked at Rosa intently. Are you still willing to do this? Rosa thought about Lucas, about his laugh in the hospital room, about his tiny fingers wrapped around hers. Yes, she said. I'm willing. Good. William opened a thick folder. Then let's get started. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Rosa's life. Every day she traveled to Hartford for preparation sessions. Rebecca and William would throw questions at her for hours, trying to simulate what the cross-examination would be like. Isn't it true you were fired from your previous job for theft? William would ask, playing the role of Hartley. I was never fired for theft. I've never stolen anything in my life. But you were arrested for shoplifting, weren't you? Charges were dropped. The security tape proved I didn't take anything. So you expect us to believe that you were completely innocent, that you just happened to be with someone who was stealing? It's the truth. The truth. William would lean forward, his voice dripping with skepticism. Miss Martinez, you work as a cleaning lady. You've been evicted. You've been arrested. You've been in abusive relationships. And you expect this jury to believe that a woman of your background correctly identified a complex case of medical child abuse that doctors missed, that you, with no medical training, no education, no credentials, knew better than everyone else. Rosa's hands would clench under the table. I knew what I saw. What you saw, or what you wanted to see. Isn't it possible that you wanted to be important, that you wanted to be the hero, that you saw an opportunity to make yourself matter and you took it regardless of the truth? That's not what happened. Then explain to me, Miss Martinez, why none of the other housekeepers reported anything. 4 women worked in that house before you. 4 women saw that baby every day, and not one of them made these accusations. Are you smarter than all of them? More observant? Or are you just more desperate for attention? By the end of these sessions, Rosa would be shaking with rage and exhaustion. But slowly, day by day, she learned to stay calm, to stick to the facts, to not let the attacks rattle her. You're getting better, Rebecca told her after the 3rd week. You're starting to sound like someone the jury will believe. I am someone the jury should believe. I'm telling the truth. I know, but the truth isn't always enough. You have to tell it in a way that makes people feel it. Rebecca paused. There's something else you should know. We've been digging into Margaret's past, looking for patterns. Rosa sat up straighter. What did you find? Rebecca pulled out a file and slid it across the table. Margaret had a daughter, before Jonathan. Her name was Elizabeth. Rosa frowned. Jonathan has a sister. Had. Elizabeth died when she was 4 years old. Rebecca's voice was careful. The official cause of death was a rare autoimmune disorder. Sound familiar? Rosa's blood went cold. Are you saying... I'm saying that Elizabeth was sick for months before she died, constantly in and out of hospitals. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Margaret was praised for being a devoted mother who never left her daughter's bedside. Oh my God. We can't prove anything. It was over 40 years ago. Medical records from that era are incomplete at best, but the pattern is there. Rebecca's eyes were hard. Margaret has done this before, and she got away with it. Rosa felt sick. She killed her own daughter. We don't know that for certain, but we suspect. And if we can find evidence, if we can connect the cases, it changes everything. It's not just about Lucas anymore. It's about a lifetime of abuse that was never punished. Rosa stared at the file in front of her. A 4-year-old girl named Elizabeth who got sicker and sicker while her mother played the devoted caretaker. A 6-month-old boy named Lucas who was dying in a cold room while his grandmother controlled everything. 40 years apart. The same pattern. The same monster. We need to find proof, Rosa said quietly. We're working on it. Detective Morrison is tracking down people who knew Elizabeth. Doctors, nurses, family friends. Anyone who might remember something. What about Margaret's husband, Jonathan's father? Thomas Whitmore died 15 years ago. Heart attack. Rebecca hesitated. Though there's some question about that too. Rosa looked up sharply. You think she killed him? I think Margaret Whitmore has spent her entire life eliminating obstacles. Anyone who got in her way. Anyone who threatened her control. Rebecca closed the file. And I think you need to be very careful, Rosa, because right now you're the biggest obstacle she's ever faced. That night, Rosa got the first threat. She was walking from the subway to her mother's apartment when a black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. Miss Martinez. Rosa kept walking, her heart pounding. Miss Martinez, I have a message from Mrs. Whitmore. Rosa stopped, turned. A man in a dark suit sat in the back of the car. His face was bland, forgettable, the kind of face that blended into crowds. What message? The man smiled. Mrs. Whitmore wants you to know that she admires your courage. Not many people would stand up to someone of her resources. It's almost impressive. He paused. She also wants you to know that courage has consequences. Bad things happen to courageous people, Miss Martinez. Accidents, illnesses, unfortunate circumstances that can't be explained. Rosa felt ice spreading through her veins. Is that a threat? It's information. The man's smile didn't waver. Mrs. Whitmore believes in sharing information. For example, did you know your mother's building has failed 3 fire inspections in the past 2 years? It would be tragic if something happened. All those old people, all that faulty wiring. Rosa's fists clenched. If you touch my mother, I'll kill you. No one's touching anyone, yet. The man reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. A gift from Mrs. Whitmore. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. He tossed the envelope out the window. It landed at Rosa's feet. Have a pleasant evening, Miss Martinez, and give my regards to your mother. The window rolled up. The car drove away. Rosa stood on the sidewalk, shaking with rage and fear. She picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was $50,000 in cash, and a note in elegant handwriting. This could be the beginning, or this could be the end. The choice is yours. Rosa stared at the money for a long moment. Then she walked to the nearest police station and turned it in as evidence. The next morning, she called Rebecca Torres. They came to me last night, offered me money, threatened my mother. Are you okay? I'm angry, I'm scared, and I'm more determined than ever. Rosa's voice was steel. Whatever it takes, Rebecca, whatever it costs me, I'm taking that woman down. Then we need to move faster. The preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks, but there's been a development. What kind of development? Jonathan Whitmore wants to talk to you. Lucas's father. He flew back from Hong Kong yesterday. Rosa was silent for a moment. Why does he want to talk to me? I don't know, but he reached out through his lawyers. He says it's important. He says he has information. Rosa thought about the man she had seen once at the mansion, rushing through the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, barely glancing at the nursery where his son was dying. I'll meet him. Are you sure he could be working with his mother? It could be a trap. Or he could know something that helps us. Rosa took a deep breath. Set up the meeting. 2 days later, Rosa walked into a coffee shop in Midtown Manhattan. Jonathan Whitmore was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking nothing like the powerful businessman she had expected. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Rosa sat down across from him. Mr. Whitmore. Miss Martinez. His voice was hoarse. Thank you for coming. Your lawyer said you have information. I do. He stared at his coffee cup. I also have an apology, though I know it doesn't matter. Rosa waited. I should have been there, Jonathan said quietly. I should have seen what was happening. Instead, I was in Hong Kong closing deals while my mother was killing my son. His voice cracked. What kind of father does that make me? I don't know, Mr. Whitmore. I'm not here to judge you. You should. Everyone should. He looked up at her. My mother controlled my entire life. Every decision, every relationship, every choice. I didn't marry Catherine because I loved her. I married her because my mother said she was suitable. I didn't have a child because I wanted one. I had a child because my mother said it was time for an heir. Rosa felt something shift in her chest. Not sympathy exactly, but understanding. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand who my mother really is. Jonathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook. This belonged to my father. I found it in his study after he died. I never showed anyone because I didn't understand what it meant. But now I do. He slid the notebook across the table. Rosa opened it. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting dates observations. Rosa read slowly, her heart pounding harder with every word. March 14th. Elizabeth worse again. M insists only she can care for her. Doctors frustrated. Something not right. April 2nd. Found strange bottle in M's bathroom. Asked about it. She said vitamins. Didn't look like vitamins. April 18th. Elizabeth had good day when M was away at luncheon. Coincidence May 3rd. Confronted M about bottle. She denied everything. Called me paranoid. Maybe I am. May 29th. Elizabeth died this morning. M devastated. Or performing devastated. Can't tell anymore. God help me, I can't tell. Rosa looked up at Jonathan, her hands shaking. Your father knew. He suspected. He never had proof. And he was too afraid of her to push. Jonathan's face was twisted with grief. He spent the rest of his life pretending everything was fine, drinking himself to sleep every night, dying slowly of guilt and fear. He paused. I was 11 when Elizabeth died. I barely remember her, but I remember my mother at the funeral. She was crying, wailing, making sure everyone saw her grief. And even then, something felt wrong. I just didn't know what. Why didn't you ever look at this notebook before? Because I didn't want to know. Jonathan's voice was barely a whisper. Because it was easier to believe my mother was difficult but not evil. Because facing the truth would have meant facing everything I'd allowed her to do to my own family. He met Rosa's eyes. I'm not a brave man, Miss Martinez. I've never stood up to anyone in my life. But you are brave, braver than anyone I've ever met. And I'm asking you to use this. Use it to stop her. Please. Rosa stared at the notebook. Thomas Whitmore had known. For 40 years he had known what his wife was capable of, and he had done nothing. But now his words could finally matter. I'll make sure the prosecution gets this, Rosa said. It's not proof by itself, but combined with everything else. There's more. Jonathan pulled out his phone. I've been going through my mother's financial records, things I never looked at before because I trusted her to manage the family money. I found payments, regular payments to Dr. Foster going back 5 years, long before Lucas was born. Rosa frowned. 5 years? But Catherine said Dr. Foster only started treating Lucas after he was born. Exactly. So why was my mother paying him for 5 years? Jonathan showed her the screen. And there's something else. Payments to a chemical supply company, monthly, for something called potassium chloride. Rosa's blood went cold. What is potassium chloride? I looked it up. It's used for lethal injections. In large doses, it stops the heart. In small doses over time, it causes symptoms that look like natural illness. Jonathan's voice was hollow. My mother has been buying it for 15 years, since just before my father died. The room seemed to spin around Rosa. She killed your father. I think she's killed a lot of people. Jonathan put his phone away. And I think she would have killed Lucas too, if you hadn't stopped her." Rosa sat in silence, trying to process everything she had just learned. Margaret Whitmore wasn't just a controlling grandmother who had gone too far. She was a serial killer. "I need to get this to the district attorney," Rosa said finally. "All of it. The notebook, the financial records, everything." "I'll testify," Jonathan's voice was firm. "Against my own mother, in open court. Whatever you need." Rosa looked at him for a long moment. "Why? Why now, after everything?" "Because I held my son yesterday. For the first time since he was born, I really held him. And he smiled at me." Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. "He smiled at me, Miss Martinez. After everything my family put him through, he smiled at me. And I realized I would do anything to protect that smile, even if it means destroying my mother, even if it means destroying myself." Rosa reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You're braver than you think, Mr. Whitmore." "No, you're the brave one. I'm just finally trying to be something other than a coward." He stood up, leaving the notebook and his phone on the table. "Use everything. Burn her to the ground. It's the only way any of us will ever be free." He walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Rosa sat alone, surrounded by evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful women in America. Her hands were still shaking, but her resolve had never been stronger. 1 week before the preliminary hearing, Margaret Whitmore made her move. Rosa was leaving the CPS office when 2 men in suits approached her. "Rosa Martinez." Rosa tensed immediately. "Who's asking?" "We're federal agents, FBI." One of them flashed a badge. "You need to come with us." "Why, I haven't done anything wrong." "This isn't about what you've done, Miss Martinez. It's about your safety." The agent looked around nervously. "We have credible intelligence that there's a contract on your life. Margaret Whitmore has hired someone to eliminate you before you can testify." Rosa felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "A contract? You mean she's trying to have me killed?" "We've intercepted communications. We have surveillance." The agent took her arm gently. "We need to get you somewhere safe. Now." Rosa's mind was racing. It could be true. Margaret was clearly capable of murder, but it could also be a trap. "I need to call someone first." "There's no time. I'm not going anywhere until I talk to Rebecca Torres." The agents exchanged glances. "Fine, make it fast." Rosa pulled out her phone and dialed Rebecca's number. "Rosa, what's wrong?" "2 FBI agents just approached me. They're saying Margaret put a contract on my life. They want to take me somewhere safe." Silence on the other end. "Rosa, listen to me very carefully. Did they show you identification?" "Yes, badges." "What were their names?" Rosa looked at the agents. "What are your names?" "Agent Williams and Agent Chen." Rosa relayed the information. "Hold on." Rebecca's voice was tense. "I'm checking the FBI database right now." A pause. "Rosa, there's no Agent Williams or Agent Chen assigned to any case involving Margaret Whitmore." Rosa's blood turned to ice. "They're not FBI. Get away from them. Now, run." Rosa didn't hesitate. She spun and ran faster than she had ever run in her life. Behind her, she heard the men shouting, heard footsteps pounding after her. She ducked into an alley, then another, her lungs burning, her heart pounding. She could hear them getting closer. A door. Unlocked. She yanked it open and threw herself inside. Darkness. Silence. The smell of old boxes and dust. Rosa pressed herself against the wall, trying to control her breathing, trying to make herself invisible. Footsteps outside. Voices. Where did she go? Check the alley. She couldn't have gotten far. Rosa held her breath. The footsteps moved past, faded, disappeared. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Finally, she pulled out her phone with trembling hands. "Rebecca, I'm safe. For now." "Where are you?" "I don't know, some storage room. An abandoned building, I think." "Stay there. I'm sending real police. Give me any landmarks you can see." Rosa crept to the window and looked out. "There's a church across the street. St. Mary's, I think, and a bodega on the corner." "I know where that is. Don't move. Help is coming." 20 minutes later, Rosa was in the back of a real police car, being driven to a safe house she didn't know existed. Rebecca was waiting for her there. "Margaret's getting desperate," Rebecca said, her face grim. "She knows the case against her is getting stronger. She's trying to eliminate witnesses before the hearing." "She's not going to stop, is she? She'll keep trying until I'm dead." "Not if we stop her first." Rebecca pulled out her phone. "Jonathan's evidence changes everything. The notebook, the financial records, the potassium chloride purchases. The district attorney is filing additional charges tomorrow. First-degree murder, his father, possibly his sister." Rosa felt tears burning her eyes. "It's really happening. She's really going to pay." "She's going to pay." Rebecca put a hand on Rosa's shoulder. "But we need you alive to testify. You're our star witness, Rosa. Without you, the case falls apart." "Then keep me alive, whatever it takes." "That's exactly what we're going to do." Rosa spent the next week in the safe house preparing for the most important day of her life. Catherine came to visit once, bringing Lucas. The baby was transformed, pink skin, bright eyes, chubby cheeks. He laughed when he saw Rosa reaching out for her with strong, healthy arms. "Look at you," Rosa whispered, holding him close. "Look how strong you are." "He asks for you," Catherine said. "Well, he makes a sound that we've decided means Rosa. He does it whenever he sees a picture of you." Rosa felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm so proud of you, little one. I'm so proud of how hard you fought." Lucas grabbed her finger and squeezed his grip firm and certain. "He's going to be okay," Catherine said softly. "Because of you. He's going to grow up healthy and happy and loved, because you refuse to look away." Rosa kissed Lucas's forehead. "You be good for your mama," she whispered. "And when you're older, I'll tell you this story. I'll tell you about the time a cleaning lady and a baby and a scared mother beat one of the most powerful women in America." Lucas laughed like he understood, and maybe in some way he did. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived. Rosa put on the simple black dress Rebecca had bought for her. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone she barely recognized. Not a cleaning lady from the Bronx, a warrior, a survivor, someone who had stared into the face of evil and refused to back down. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Estoy orgullosa de ti, mija. Go show them what Martinez women are made of." Rosa smiled. Then she walked out to face Margaret Whitmore one final time. The courthouse steps were flooded with reporters. Rosa could hear them shouting questions before she even got out of the car. Cameras flashed like lightning. Microphones were thrust toward the tinted windows like weapons. "Just keep your head down and walk," Rebecca said from beside her. "Don't answer any questions. Don't make eye contact. Just walk." Rosa knotted her throat too tight for words. The car door opened. The noise hit her like a physical force. Dozens of voices screaming her name, questions flying from every direction. "Miss Martinez, how does it feel to be testifying against Margaret Whitmore? Rosa, is it true you were offered money to stay quiet? Do you have any comment on the murder charges?" Rosa kept her head down and walked, one foot in front of the other. The police officers flanking her pushed back the crowd, creating a narrow path to the courthouse doors. It felt like the longest walk of her life. Finally, they were inside. The doors closed behind them, muffling the chaos. "You okay?" Rebecca asked. "No," Rosa's voice was shaking. "But I'm here. That's what matters." They walked through security down a long hallway and stopped outside the courtroom doors. "Rosa," Rebecca turned to face her, "whatever happens in there, remember why you're doing this. Remember Lucas. Remember his laugh. Remember his smile. That's what you're fighting for." Rosa closed her eyes and pictured the baby in her arms, his tiny fingers wrapped around hers, his eyes full of hope for the first time. "I'm ready." "Then let's go." The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls. More waited in the hallway, hoping to get in. Rosa scanned the room and found Catherine sitting in the front row. Their eyes met, Catherine nodded once, her face pale but determined. Then Rosa saw Margaret. She sat at the defense table wearing an elegant gray suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. She looked like a wealthy grandmother who had wandered into the wrong building by mistake. But her eyes gave her away. When those eyes found Rosa, something shifted in them, something cold and reptilian, a predator recognizing its prey. Rosa didn't look away. "I see you," she thought. "I see exactly what you are." "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Coleman presiding. Everyone stood. The judge entered, a stern black woman in her 60s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She took her seat and surveyed the courtroom. "This is the preliminary hearing in the matter of the state of Connecticut versus Margaret Elizabeth Whitmore. The defendant is charged with child endangerment conspiracy to commit child abuse first-degree assault and 3 counts of first-degree murder." The judge's voice was calm and measured. "The purpose of this hearing is to determine whether sufficient evidence exists to proceed to trial. Is the prosecution ready?" William Chen stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Is the defense ready?" Robert Hartley rose from his seat beside Margaret. He was tall, silver-haired, distinguished, the kind of man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine about successful lawyers. "Ready, Your Honor?" "Then let's begin. Mr. Chen, call your first witness." William Chen straightened his tie. "The prosecution calls Rosa Martinez." Rosa stood. Her legs felt like water. But she made it to the witness stand without falling, without stumbling, without showing how terrified she was. The bailiff approached with a Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God." Rosa placed her hand on the Bible and thought of Lucas. "I do. Please state your name for the record." "Rosa Maria Martinez." "You may be seated." Rosa sat. William Chen approached the witness stand. "Miss Martinez, can you tell the court your occupation?" "I was employed as a housekeeper at the Whitmore estate in Greenwich, Connecticut." "And during your time there, what were your duties?" "Cleaning, laundry, general household maintenance." "Did those duties include access to the nursery where Lucas Whitmore slept?" "Yes, sir. I was assigned to clean the nursery every morning at 6 o'clock." "And what did you observe during those visits to the nursery?" Rosa took a deep breath. "The first morning I entered that room, the temperature was 58 degrees. The baby was ice cold. His skin was gray. He was barely responsive." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "And what did you do?" "I turned up the thermostat. I picked up the baby and tried to warm him. I thought he was dying." "Did you notice anything else unusual about the baby's condition?" "Yes, sir. There were marks on his body, dark red marks hidden under his arms, on his ribs, on the bottom of his foot. They looked like they had been made deliberately." "Did you report these observations to anyone?" "I tried to tell Mrs. Catherine Whitmore, the baby's mother, but she was terrified. She told me her mother-in-law had threatened to take the baby if Catherine stepped out of line." William Chen walked to the evidence table and picked up a photograph. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence Exhibit A, a photograph taken by Miss Martinez showing marks on the infant's body." "Objection." Hartley rose smoothly. "Chain of custody hasn't been established. We have no way of knowing when or where this photo was actually taken." "Your Honor, the photograph contains metadata showing it was taken at the Whitmore estate on the morning Miss Martinez discovered the marks. The metadata has been verified by digital forensics experts." Judge Coleman examined the photograph. "Objection overruled. The exhibit is admitted." The photograph was displayed on a screen for the courtroom to see. Rosa heard gasps. Someone in the gallery started crying. The image showed Lucas's tiny body covered in dark marks. It was impossible to look at and not feel rage. "Miss Martinez," William continued, "did there come a time when you confronted the defendant about your concerns?" "Yes, sir. About a week after I started working there." "And what happened during that confrontation?" Rosa looked directly at Margaret. "She admitted everything." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order, I will have order in this courtroom." When the noise finally died down, William Chen asked, "Can you tell us exactly what the defendant said?" She said she was making Lucas sick on purpose. She said Dr. Foster knew exactly what he was doing. She said once she had custody, once Catherine was out of the picture, the treatments would stop and Lucas would miraculously recover. Did she say why she was doing this? She said Catherine was weak, pathetic, that she would have raised Lucas to be soft and useless. She said under her guidance he would become a real Whitmore. Did she express any concern for the baby's well-being? No, sir. She talked about him like he was property, like he was a thing she needed to control, not a child she loved. William Chen nodded slowly. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Coleman turned to the defense table. Mr. Hartley, your witness. Robert Hartley rose from his seat like a snake uncoiling. He walked slowly toward the witness stand, his eyes never leaving Rosa's face. When he spoke, his voice was warm, almost friendly. Miss Martinez, thank you for being here today. I know this must be difficult for you. Rosa didn't respond. She had been warned about this. The false sympathy, the pretend kindness, the trap hidden beneath the smile. Let me start with some background. You grew up in the South Bronx, correct? Yes. Single mother household? Yes. Your father left when you were 7? Rosa's jaw tightened. Yes. He was an alcoholic, wasn't he? Objection. William Chen stood. Relevance, Your Honor. I'm establishing the witness's background and potential biases. I'll allow it, but get to the point, Mr. Hartley. Hartley smiled. Your father was an alcoholic who abandoned your family. Your mother worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. You've been evicted from apartments. You've been in abusive relationships. You were even arrested once, weren't you? The charges were dropped. I didn't do anything wrong. Of course you didn't. Hartley's voice dripped with false sympathy. You've had a hard life, Miss Martinez. Lots of struggles, lots of disappointments, lots of times when people with money and power made you feel small and worthless. Rosa saw where this was going. I'm not bitter if that's what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm just observing that someone with your background might have a certain view of wealthy families, a certain suspicion, a certain desire to see them brought down. I don't have a desire to see anyone brought down. I have a desire to protect children who can't protect themselves. Hartley changed tactics smoothly. You say the defendant admitted to making her grandson sick. Did anyone else hear this conversation? No, we were alone in the nursery. So it's your word against hers. I know what I heard. I'm sure you believe that. Hartley paced slowly in front of the witness stand. But isn't it possible that you misunderstood Mrs. Whitmore was explaining her grandson's medical condition? A rare autoimmune disorder that required specific treatments. Perhaps you, with no medical training whatsoever, heard something that sounded sinister, but was actually completely innocent. She said she was making him sick on purpose. There's no way to misunderstand that. Did she use those exact words, making him sick on purpose? Rosa hesitated. She said Dr. Foster knew exactly what he was doing. She said once she had custody, the treatments would stop. So she didn't actually say the words making him sick on purpose. You interpreted her statement that way. The meaning was clear. To you, perhaps. A woman with no education, no medical training, no experience with complex family dynamics. Hartley's voice hardened. But to the rest of us, it sounds like a grandmother explaining that aggressive treatment would continue until custody was settled, at which point she could explore other options. That's not what she meant. How do you know what she meant? Can you read minds, Miss Martinez? I know because the baby was dying. I know because Dr. Foster was convicted of falsifying medical records before. I know because Dr. Foster's previous case is not on trial here. And babies sometimes get sick, Miss Martinez. It's tragic, but it happens. It doesn't mean anyone is deliberately harming them. Rosa felt her control slipping. There were marks on his body, injection marks, bruises where someone had held him down. Marks that could have come from medical treatments, from a baby thrashing during examinations, from any number of innocent causes. They weren't innocent. I saw them. I photographed them. You photographed a baby's body without parental consent. Hartley turned to the jury. Let's talk about that. You were hired to clean Miss Martinez. not to conduct investigations, not to take photographs, not to play detective. I was trying to document evidence. Evidence of what a sick baby concerned grandparents' dedicated medical care. Hartley moved closer. Or were you trying to create a story, a narrative that would make you important? A poor cleaning lady from the Bronx who single-handedly uncovers a wealthy family's dark secret. Sounds like the plot of a movie, doesn't it? That's not what happened. Then explain to me why none of the other housekeepers reported anything suspicious. 4 women before you. 4 women who saw that baby every single day, and not one of them thought anything was wrong. They were scared. Margaret scared them into silence. Or perhaps they simply saw what was actually happening. A sick baby receiving treatment, a devoted grandmother helping to care for him. Nothing sinister, nothing criminal. Hartley shook his head sadly. But you needed there to be a villain, didn't you? You needed someone to blame, someone to fight, because that's easier than accepting that sometimes bad things just happen. That's not true. Isn't it? Hartley's voice rose. You came from nothing, Miss Martinez. You had nothing. You were nothing. And then suddenly you had a chance to be a hero, to bring down one of the wealthiest families in America, to see your name in newspapers and your face on television. Can you honestly tell this court that temptation didn't influence your perception? Rosa felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I can honestly tell this court that I held a dying baby in my arms. I can honestly tell this court that his grandmother admitted to making him sick. I can honestly tell this court that if I hadn't acted, Lucas Whitmore would be dead right now. Her voice broke, but she kept going. You can attack my background. You can attack my education. You can attack everything about me, but you can't change what I saw. You can't change what I heard. And you can't change the fact that a little boy is alive today because I refuse to look away. The courtroom was silent. Hartley stared at her for a long moment. No further questions. Rosa's legs were shaking as she returned to her seat. Rebecca squeezed her hand. You did great, Rebecca whispered. You did so great. But Rosa barely heard her. She was watching Margaret, watching for any reaction. Margaret's face was completely composed, but her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had turned white. William Chen called his next witness. The prosecution calls Dr. Patricia Wells. The pediatric forensic specialist took the stand. She was a small woman with silver hair and kind eyes behind round glasses. Dr. Wells, can you describe your findings regarding Lucas Whitmore? Yes. When Lucas was admitted to Greenwich Hospital, I conducted a comprehensive forensic examination. I found evidence of chronic malnutrition signs of repeated injection sites and elevated levels of potassium chloride in his system. Potassium chloride, can you explain what that is? It's a chemical compound that in large doses is used in lethal injections to stop the heart. In smaller doses over time, it causes symptoms that mimic natural illness, weakness, failure to thrive, cardiac irregularities. And you found this substance in a 6-month-old baby's system. Yes, at levels that could not be explained by any legitimate medical treatment. Another murmur through the courtroom. In your expert opinion, Dr. Wells, was Lucas Whitmore being deliberately poisoned? Objection. Hartley was on his feet. Calls for speculation. Dr. Wells is a forensic expert qualified to render such opinions, William Chen responded. Overruled. The witness may answer. Dr. Wells looked directly at the jury. In my expert opinion, based on 30 years of experience in pediatric forensics, Lucas Whitmore was being systematically poisoned. The pattern of substance administration, the hidden injection sites, the deliberate concealment of symptoms, all of it points to intentional harm. No further questions. Hartley's cross-examination of Dr. Wells was brutal, but she held firm. Every question he asked, she answered with calm, clinical precision. By the time she stepped down, the prosecution's case looked solid. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The prosecution calls Jonathan Whitmore. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Margaret's head snapped toward the door. For the first time, real emotion crossed her face. Shock, betrayal, fury. Jonathan walked in, avoiding his mother's eyes. He took the stand and was sworn in. "Mr. Whitmore, what is your relationship to the defendant?" "She's my mother." "And yet you've agreed to testify against her. Can you explain why?" Jonathan finally looked at Margaret. "Because she's a monster. Because she killed my sister. Because she killed my father. And because she tried to kill my son." Margaret half rose from her seat. "Jonathan, how dare you?" "Mrs. Whitmore, sit down." Judge Coleman's voice was sharp. "Any further outbursts, and you'll be removed from this courtroom." Hartley put a hand on Margaret's arm. She sat, but her eyes were blazing. "Mr. Whitmore," William continued, "you mentioned your sister. Can you tell us about her son, Elizabeth? She died when she was 4 years old. The official cause was a rare autoimmune disorder." Jonathan's voice was hollow. "But my father suspected the truth. He kept a journal. I found it after he died." "And what did that journal reveal?" "That my mother was making Elizabeth sick, just like she made Lucas sick. The same pattern, the same symptoms, the same devoted mother who never left her child's bedside while secretly poisoning her." The courtroom exploded. The judge banged her gavel repeatedly. People were shouting. Someone was crying. Through it all, Rosa watched Margaret. The mask was cracking. The composure was shattering. For the first time, Rosa saw fear in those cold eyes. Real fear. Order, order in this court. When the noise finally subsided, William Chen presented the evidence. Thomas Whitmore's journal. The financial records showing payments to Dr. Foster going back years. The purchases of potassium chloride. Each piece of evidence was another nail in Margaret's coffin. By the time Jonathan stepped down the case against Margaret, Whitmore was overwhelming. But Hartley wasn't done fighting. "Your Honor, the defense moves to dismiss all charges. The prosecution's case relies on hearsay circumstantial evidence and the testimony of a disgruntled housekeeper and a son with clear personal grievances against his mother." "The motion is denied, Mr. Hartley. There is more than sufficient evidence to proceed to trial." Judge Coleman turned to the courtroom. "Based on the evidence presented, I find probable cause to believe that Margaret Elizabeth Whitmore committed the crimes charged. The defendant will be held without bail pending trial." "Without bail?" Hartley sputtered. "Your Honor, my client is a 65-year-old woman with no criminal history. She poses no flight risk. Mr. Hartley, your client is charged with 3 counts of murder and the attempted murder of an infant. She has unlimited financial resources and connections around the world. She has already attempted to intimidate and potentially harm witnesses in this case." The judge's voice was ice. "Bail is denied. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down. 2 officers approached Margaret. "Margaret Whitmore, please stand." Margaret rose slowly. Her face had gone completely white. All the power, all the control, all the money in the world couldn't save her now. As they led her past, Rosa Margaret stopped. "You think you've won?" she whispered. "You think this is over?" "It is over," Rosa said quietly. "Nothing is ever over." Margaret's eyes were empty dead. "I will destroy you, even from prison, even from the grave. I will make sure you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." "Maybe you will, but your grandson is going to live. He's going to grow up healthy and happy and loved, and you're never going to touch him again." Rosa met her gaze without flinching. "That's my victory, Mrs. Whitmore. That's all I ever wanted." Margaret stared at her for a long moment. Then the officers pulled her away. As she was led out of the courtroom, Margaret Whitmore looked back one final time. Not at her son, not at her lawyers, at Rosa. And in that look, Rosa saw something she had never expected to see. Defeat. Real, absolute, complete defeat. The monster had finally been beaten. Outside the courthouse, the reporters went insane. Rosa stood on the steps, Rebecca on one side, Catherine and Jonathan on the other. Lucas was in Catherine's arms, healthy and pink and laughing. "Miss Martinez! Miss Martinez! How does it feel to bring down Margaret Whitmore?" Rosa looked at the cameras, at the microphones, at the sea of faces waiting for her answer. "I didn't bring down anyone," she said quietly. "I just refused to look away. I saw a baby who needed help, and I helped him. That's all. Any decent person would have done the same. But you risked everything. Your job, your safety, your life. Rosa looked at Lucas. He was reaching for her, making that sound Catherine said meant Rosa. She took him from Catherine's arms and held him close. "Some things are worth risking everything for," she said. "Some people are worth risking everything for." Lucas laughed and grabbed her face with both hands, and Rosa Martinez, the cleaning lady from the Bronx who had stared down one of the most powerful women in America, laughed with him. The trial would take months. The appeals would take years. There would be more threats, more challenges, more moments when Rosa wondered if she had made the right choice. But standing on those courthouse steps, holding a baby who should have died but didn't, surrounded by people who had found the courage to fight because she showed them it was possible, Rosa knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would do it all again, 1,000 times over. Because Lucas Whitmore was alive, and that was worth everything. 6 months later, the trial began. Rosa had spent every day since the preliminary hearing preparing for this moment. Rebecca and William had drilled her on every possible question, every potential attack, every way Hartley might try to destroy her credibility. But nothing could have prepared her for walking into that courtroom and seeing Margaret Whitmore again. The woman had changed. 6 months in a maximum security prison had stripped away the polish, the elegance, the careful construction of wealth and power. Margaret's hair had gone completely white. Her face had hollowed, her hands shook constantly, but her eyes were the same, cold, calculating, full of hatred. When those eyes found Rosa, they burned with a fury that made Rosa's skin crawl. "She still thinks she can win," Rebecca whispered as they took their seats. "Her lawyers have been filing motions nonstop, trying to get evidence thrown out, trying to delay, trying everything. Will it work? No. The judge has denied every single motion. The evidence is too strong." Rebecca paused. "But Hartley has one more trick up his sleeve. We don't know what it is yet." Rosa felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of trick? That's what worries me. We don't know." The trial proceeded for 3 weeks. Witness after witness took the stand. Dr. Patricia Wells presented her forensic findings again, this time in even greater detail. The jury saw photographs of Lucas's marks, heard about the potassium chloride in his system, learned about the pattern of abuse that had been hidden for months. Dr. David Foster testified as part of his plea deal. He admitted everything: the payments from Margaret, the deliberate poisoning, the plan to make Lucas appear so sick that Catherine would be declared unfit. "Mrs. Whitmore told me exactly what she wanted," Foster said, his voice hollow. "She said Catherine was weak, that she would destroy the Whitmore legacy. She said Lucas needed to be raised by someone strong, someone like her. And you agreed to poison a 6-month-old baby for money." Foster's face crumpled. "I convinced myself it wasn't really hurting him, just making him sick enough to need care. I told myself he would recover once Margaret had custody." He looked at the jury with dead eyes. "I was wrong. I was a coward and a monster, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life." Jonathan Whitmore testified again, presenting his father's journal and the financial evidence. He described growing up under Margaret's control, the fear that permeated every aspect of his childhood, the way his mother manipulated everyone around her. "She made me believe I was nothing without her," Jonathan said, "that every success I had was because of her, that every failure was my own fault. It took me 40 years to see the truth." "And what is the truth, Mr. Whitmore?" Jonathan looked directly at his mother. "The truth is that Margaret Whitmore is a murderer. She killed my sister Elizabeth when I was 11 years old. She killed my father 15 years later. And she tried to kill my son." His voice broke. "The truth is that I was too afraid to stop her, too weak, too controlled, but not anymore." Margaret sat motionless through her son's testimony, her face a mask of stone. But Rosa saw her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had turned bone white. Catherine testified about the years of psychological abuse, the constant criticism, the threats, the way Margaret had systematically destroyed her confidence and isolated her from everyone who might have helped. She told me I was worthless. Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. She told me I would never be a real Whitmore. She told me that if I ever tried to leave or fight back, she would take Lucas and I would never see him again. She wiped her eyes. I believed her. I was so scared I let her hurt my baby rather than stand up to her. But you did stand up eventually, William Chen said gently. Can you tell us what changed? Catherine looked at Rosa. She did. Rosa showed me that it was possible to fight back. She showed me that being scared wasn't an excuse to let evil win. Catherine's voice grew stronger. She risked everything to save my son. The least I could do was find the courage to tell the truth. Then came Rosa's turn. She took the stand for the final time, knowing that everything depended on the next few hours. William Chen led her through her testimony carefully, methodically. Every detail, every observation, every moment from the day she arrived at the Whitmore mansion to the night she took Lucas to the hospital. When he finished, Hartley rose for his cross-examination. But something was different this time. He wasn't smiling. Miss Martinez, Hartley began, his voice unusually subdued. Over the past 3 weeks, we've heard a great deal of testimony about my client. Much of it has been damaging. Some of it has been devastating. Rosa waited, her heart pounding. But there's something that's been bothering me throughout this trial. Something that doesn't add up. Hartley paced slowly in front of the witness stand. You testified that on your first morning at the Whitmore estate, you discovered Lucas in a freezing room, barely responsive, covered in marks. Is that correct? Yes. And you immediately recognized that something was wrong? Yes. Because you're so observant, so intuitive, so determined to protect children. Rosa didn't like where this was going. I saw a baby who needed help. Of course you did. Hartley stopped pacing. But here's what I don't understand. You saw all of this on your very first morning, yet you didn't report it to anyone. You didn't call the police. You didn't contact Child Protective Services. Instead, you continued working at the mansion for nearly 2 weeks. I needed time to gather evidence. I needed to understand what was happening. Or perhaps you needed time to create a story, to manufacture evidence, to construct a narrative that would make you the hero. Objection. William Chen stood. Counsel is badgering the witness. Overruled. The witness may answer. Rosa took a deep breath. I didn't manufacture anything. I documented what I saw because I knew no one would believe me without proof. I was a cleaning lady from the Bronx. Margaret Whitmore was one of the richest women in Connecticut. I needed evidence that couldn't be denied. Hartley nodded slowly. Evidence that couldn't be denied. Like the photographs you took without consent, like the recordings you made without authorization, like the testimony you've given that conveniently supports everything the prosecution needs. It supports the prosecution because it's the truth. Is it? Hartley walked to the defense table and picked up a folder. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Defense Exhibit 47, a psychiatric evaluation of the witness conducted by Dr. Harold Morrison. Rosa's blood went cold. Objection. William Chen was on his feet. This evaluation was conducted without the prosecution's knowledge or the witness's consent. The evaluation was conducted using publicly available information and interviews with people who know Miss Martinez. Hartley replied smoothly. It's entirely admissible. Judge Coleman frowned. I'll allow it, but I'll be watching carefully, Mr. Hartley. Hartley opened the folder. Dr. Morrison is a renowned forensic psychiatrist with over 40 years of experience. Based on his analysis, he concludes that Miss Martinez exhibits classic signs of what's called hero syndrome, a psychological condition in which individuals create or exaggerate crises so they can be seen as the one who solves them. Rosa felt the room spinning. That's insane. I didn't create anything. Dr. Morrison interviewed your former employers, your neighbors, your ex-boyfriend. A pattern emerged. Wherever you go, Miss Martinez drama follows. Problems arise that only you can solve. Conflicts develop that only you can mediate. I help people. That's different from creating problems. Is it? Hartley read from the folder. Your ex-boyfriend, Marcus Williams, described you as someone who needed constant attention, who would start arguments just so she could be the one to end them, who couldn't stand being ordinary. Rosa felt tears burning her eyes. Marcus was abusive. He hit me. He's lying because he wants to hurt me. He's lying. Your former landlord is lying. Your coworkers are lying. Everyone who says anything negative about you is lying. Hartley shook his head sadly. At some point, Miss Martinez, we have to consider the possibility that you're the one who isn't telling the truth. Rosa looked at the jury. Some of them were frowning. Some looked uncertain. Hartley was planting doubt, creating confusion, doing exactly what he was famous for. I know what I saw, Rosa said, her voice shaking. I know what Margaret admitted to me. I know what was happening to Lucas. You know what you believe happened, what you wanted to happen, what you needed to happen so you could finally be someone important. Hartley closed the folder. No further questions. Rosa returned to her seat, her legs barely supporting her. He's destroying me, she whispered to Rebecca. The jury is doubting me. They're confused right now, but the evidence is still on our side, the forensics, the journal, the financial records. One psychiatric evaluation can't undo all of that. But Rosa wasn't so sure. She looked at Margaret across the courtroom, and for the first time since the preliminary hearing, she saw something in those cold eyes that terrified her. Hope. The closing arguments came the next day. William Chen went first. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the past 3 weeks, you've heard testimony that should horrify any decent human being. A grandmother who poisoned her own grandchild. A woman who murdered her daughter 40 years ago and was never held accountable. A monster who killed her husband and tried to blame it on natural causes. He walked slowly in front of the jury box. The defense wants you to believe that Rosa Martinez made all of this up, that she's mentally unstable, that she manufactured evidence and created a narrative out of thin air. He paused. But consider the facts. Dr. Patricia Wells, one of the most respected forensic specialists in the country, found potassium chloride in Lucas Whitmore's system. Dr. David Foster confessed to administering that poison. Financial records show payments from Margaret Whitmore to Dr. Foster going back years. Thomas Whitmore's journal documents his suspicions about his daughter's death 40 years ago. William turned to look at Margaret. This is not a case of one woman's word against another. This is a case built on evidence, scientific evidence, documentary evidence, the testimony of Margaret Whitmore's own son. He faced the jury again. Rosa Martinez didn't create this evidence. She uncovered it. She risked everything to save a baby who was being murdered in plain sight. And now the defense wants to punish her for having the courage to speak up. He walked back to the prosecution table. Don't let them succeed. Don't let wealth and power win again. Give Lucas Whitmore the justice he deserves. Give Elizabeth Whitmore the justice she was denied 40 years ago. Give Thomas Whitmore the justice he was too afraid to seek for himself. William's voice rose. Find Margaret Whitmore guilty. It's the only verdict that honors the truth. Hartley's closing was everything Rosa had feared. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard a compelling story over the past 3 weeks. A story of good versus evil, of a brave cleaning lady versus a wealthy villain, of a baby saved from the clutches of a monster. He shook his head. But stories aren't evidence, emotions aren't proof, and this case has been built on both. He walked to the jury box, his voice calm and reasonable. Let's look at what we actually know. A baby was sick. That's true. Babies get sick. It's tragic, but it happens. A cleaning lady believed she saw signs of abuse. That's also true. But believing something doesn't make it real. Hartley gestured toward Rosa. Miss Martinez has a documented history of inserting herself into dramatic situations. She has a psychological profile consistent with someone who needs to be seen as a hero. She took photographs without consent, made recordings without authorization, and conducted her own investigation despite having no training or qualifications. And he turned back to the jury. The prosecution wants you to believe that Margaret Whitmore is a serial killer who has been murdering her family members for 40 years. Think about that for a moment. 40 years. And in all that time, no one suspected anything. No doctor, no nurse, no family member, no friend. Margaret Whitmore outsmarted everyone for 4 decades, but a cleaning lady from the Bronx figured it out in 2 weeks. Some jury members shifted uncomfortably. It doesn't add up, because the truth is simpler and sadder. A baby was sick. A family struggled to cope. A cleaning lady with psychological issues saw what she wanted to see and constructed a narrative that made her the hero. Hartley's voice softened. Margaret Whitmore is not a monster. She's a mother and grandmother who has been vilified by people who don't understand her, people who resent her wealth, people who want to tear her down because she represents everything they're not. He walked back to the defense table. Don't let jealousy and resentment guide your verdict. Don't let a troubled woman's fantasy become another woman's prison sentence. Look at the evidence. Really look at it. And when you do, you'll see that the only reasonable verdict is not guilty. He sat down. The jury retired to deliberate. Rosa sat in the hallway outside the courtroom waiting. Rebecca sat beside her. Catherine was there too, with Lucas, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Jonathan paced back and forth, unable to stay still. "How long do you think it will take?" Rosa asked. "Could be hours. Could be days." Rebecca's voice was tired. "The longer they deliberate, the more worried I get. Quick verdicts usually favor the prosecution. Long deliberations mean the jury is divided." Rosa looked at Lucas. He was so different now, pink and healthy and chubby. He laughed all the time. He reached for everyone who came near him, trusting and happy. "Whatever happens," Rosa said quietly, "he's alive. He's okay. That's what matters." "It's not all that matters." Catherine's voice was fierce. "Justice matters. Accountability matters. She needs to pay for what she did." "She will," Jonathan said, but his voice wasn't certain. "She has to." Hours passed. The sun went down. The building grew quiet. Still no verdict. Rosa tried to eat something from the vending machine. It tasted like cardboard. She threw it away after 3 bites. At 11 o'clock that night, the bailiff appeared. "The jury has reached a verdict." Rosa's heart stopped. They filed back into the courtroom, which had somehow filled with people again despite the late hour. News crews crowded outside. The tension was suffocating. Judge Coleman took her seat. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. A middle-aged man with glasses and a kind face. "We have your honor." "On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Elizabeth Whitmore, how do you find—" Rosa held her breath. "We find the defendant guilty." A sob escaped from somewhere in the gallery. Rosa felt tears streaming down her face. "On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Thomas Whitmore, how do you find—" "We find the defendant guilty." More sobs. More tears. Rosa grabbed Rebecca's hand and squeezed so hard it hurt. "On the charge of attempted murder in the case of Lucas Whitmore, how do you find—" "We find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Rosa couldn't see through her tears. She could hear people crying, shouting, celebrating. She could feel Rebecca hugging her, Catherine grabbing her arm, voices all around her saying thank you, thank you, thank you. But all she could focus on was Margaret Whitmore. The old woman sat perfectly still at the defense table. Her lawyers were talking urgently, but she wasn't listening. She was staring straight ahead at nothing. For 65 years, Margaret Whitmore had controlled everything and everyone around her. She had killed when it suited her. She had manipulated when she needed to. She had destroyed anyone who got in her way. And now it was over. Judge Coleman banged her gavel repeatedly until order was restored. "Sentencing will take place in 30 days. The defendant is remanded to custody until that time." She looked at Margaret with undisguised contempt. "Mrs. Whitmore, you have been found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. I hope the remaining years of your life give you time to reflect on the suffering you've caused." Margaret finally moved. She turned her head slowly and found Rosa in the crowd. Their eyes met, and Rosa saw something she had never expected to see in Margaret Whitmore's face. Fear. Real, genuine, absolute fear. The monster finally understood that she had lost. 1 month later, Margaret Whitmore was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rosa watched from the gallery as the judge delivered the sentence. Margaret stood motionless, her face blank, her eyes empty. Mrs. Whitmore, you have shown no remorse for your crimes. You have offered no apology to your victims or their families. You have spent your entire life believing that your wealth and power placed you above the law. Judge Coleman's voice was hard. Today, you learn differently. Today, justice finally catches up with you. Margaret was led away in handcuffs. She didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, Rosa faced the reporters one final time. Miss Martinez, how does it feel to know that Margaret Whitmore will spend the rest of her life in prison? Rosa thought about the question for a long moment. It feels like the beginning of something, not the end. She looked at the cameras. Margaret Whitmore hurt a lot of people. She destroyed families. She took lives. And for decades, no one stopped her because she was rich and powerful and connected. Rosa's voice grew stronger. But she's not the only one. There are other Margaret Whitmores out there, other people who think their money makes them untouchable, other children who are suffering while the adults around them look away. She paused. If this case taught me anything, it's that one person can make a difference. Not because they're special, not because they're powerful, just because they refuse to be silent. What's next for you, Miss Martinez? Rosa smiled. I'm going to keep fighting. For children who can't fight for themselves. For people who've been told their voices don't matter. For everyone who's ever been made to feel like they're nothing. She looked directly into the cameras. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know. You're not nothing. Your voice matters. And if you see something wrong, you have the power to change it. 3 years later, Rosa stood in the backyard of a small house in Vermont, watching Lucas Whitmore run through the grass. He was almost 4 years old now, healthy, happy, full of energy and laughter and life. Catherine and Jonathan had rebuilt their family from the wreckage of the Whitmore empire. They'd sold the Greenwich mansion, donated most of their inherited wealth to children's charities, and moved to a quiet town where nobody knew their names. They'd invited Rosa to Lucas's 4th birthday party. "Rosa, Rosa, watch me!" Lucas ran toward her at full speed and launched himself into her arms. She caught him easily, spinning him around while he shrieked with joy. "You're getting so big!" Rosa laughed. "Soon you'll be too heavy for me to pick up." "Never." Lucas wrapped his arms around her neck. "You're the strongest person in the whole world." Rosa felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know about that, buddy." "Mama says you are. She says you saved my life." Rosa looked over at Catherine, who was watching with tears in her own eyes. "Your mama saved your life too. She was very brave." "You're both brave." Lucas pulled back and looked at her with those bright, healthy eyes. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Rosa hugged him tight. "You already are, little one. You already are." Later that evening, after the cake was eaten and the presents were opened, Rosa sat on the porch with Catherine and Jonathan. Lucas was inside, exhausted from the excitement, sleeping peacefully in his new race car bed. "Thank you for coming," Catherine said quietly. "It means the world to him, to all of us. I wouldn't miss it. Rosa, there's something we've been wanting to tell you." Jonathan leaned forward. "We've been talking to our lawyers about the future." Rosa frowned. "What kind of future?" "If anything ever happens to us," Catherine said slowly, "we want Lucas to go to you." Rosa's heart stopped. "What?" "We've updated our will. If we die, if we're incapacitated, if anything happens that means we can't take care of him, you become his guardian." Catherine reached out and took Rosa's hand. "You saved his life when we couldn't. You fought for him when we were too weak. There's no one in the world we trust more." Rosa couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face. "You don't have to answer now," Jonathan said. "Just think about it, and know that whatever you decide, we'll always be grateful. For everything." Rosa wiped her eyes. "I don't need to think about it. Yes, if you ever need me, I'll be there. For Lucas, for both of you, always." Catherine stood and hugged her, crying. Jonathan joined them, wrapping his arms around both women, and Rosa felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Family, real family, not bound by blood, but by something stronger. Love. 5 years later, Rosa Martinez stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. Behind her hung a banner that read, "The Lucas Foundation Protecting Children, Empowering Voices." In front of her sat 500 people, donors, advocates, politicians, survivors. And in the front row, holding his mother's hand, sat Lucas Whitmore, 9 years old now, bright, confident, full of life. Rosa looked at him and smiled. Then she began to speak. 9 years ago, I was a cleaning lady from the Bronx. I had nothing, no money, no power, no connections. I was told my whole life that people like me don't matter, that our voices don't count, that we should keep our heads down, do our jobs, and never ever challenge the people above us. She paused. Then I met a baby who was dying in a mansion full of money. A baby whose own grandmother was slowly killing him. A baby who had no one to fight for him because everyone around him was too scared, too weak, or too corrupt to do what was right. Rosa looked at the audience. I was scared too. I was weak too. I had every reason to walk away and pretend I hadn't seen anything, but I couldn't. Because that baby looked at me with eyes that begged for help, and I realized that if I didn't act, no one would. He would die, and the person who killed him would never face justice. Her voice grew stronger. So I fought, not because I was brave, not because I was special, but because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. Because being poor doesn't mean being blind. Because being powerless doesn't mean being voiceless. Because every single person in this room has the ability to change the world for someone who needs help. Rosa gestured to the banner behind her. The Lucas Foundation was created to give others the support I didn't have. To help people who see abuse, who witness injustice, who know something is wrong but don't know what to do about it. We provide legal assistance, financial support, protection for whistleblowers, and most importantly, we provide hope. She looked at Lucas again. That baby who was dying 9 years ago is sitting in the front row today. He's healthy, he's happy, he's alive, and he's alive because one person refused to look away. Rosa stepped back from the podium. I'm not asking you to be heroes. I'm asking you to be human, to see the suffering around you, to speak up when you witness wrong, to believe that your voice matters even when the whole world tells you it doesn't. She took a deep breath. Because here's what I learned from a dying baby and a cold nursery and a monster who thought she was untouchable. Evil wins when good people stay silent, but when even one person finds the courage to speak, everything changes. Rosa's voice rose, filling the room. So speak, fight, protect, love, and never ever let anyone tell you that you're not strong enough to make a difference. The audience rose to their feet. The applause was deafening. But Rosa wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at Lucas, who was standing on his chair, clapping harder than anyone, his face shining with pride and love. He caught her eye and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Rosa smiled through her tears. No, she thought. Thank you. Thank you for teaching me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and acting anyway. It's about seeing a child who needs help and refusing to walk away. It's about believing that love is stronger than fear, that truth is stronger than lies, and that one ordinary person can change the world. That night, Rosa went home to her small apartment in New York. On her wall hung a framed photograph of Lucas as a baby, the one Catherine had given her on his first birthday after the trial. Beneath it was a handwritten note. To Rosa, you saw me when no one else did. You saved me when no one else would. I love you forever. Lucas. Rosa touched the photograph gently. Then she sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and started writing. She had more work to do, more children to help, more voices to amplify, more monsters to fight. The story of Lucas Whitmore was over, but the story of Rosa Martinez was just beginning, and it would be a story of courage, a story of hope, a story of one ordinary woman who looked at evil and refused to blink. Because that's what heroes do, Not the ones in movies or comic books, the real ones. The ones who clean houses and raise children and work double shifts and never give up. The ones who see wrong and refuse to look away. The ones who believe, despite everything, that one person can make a difference. Rosa Martinez was one of those heroes. And now, so are you. Because you listened to her story. You felt her courage. You understood her truth. And the next time you see someone who needs help, someone who has no voice, someone who is dying in plain sight while the world looks away, you'll remember. You'll remember a cleaning lady from the Bronx who stared down a monster. You'll remember a baby who survived against all odds. You'll remember that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and acting anyway. And you'll find the strength to do what Rosa did, to speak, to fight, to protect, to love, because that's what it means to be human, and that's the only thing that truly matters.